Khalid, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you today?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Well, alhamdulillah.
That's good. Thank you for joining us all the way from Johannesburg. It's been a while, but we finally did it.
We finally managed to get scheduled in touch, and then, yeah, alhamdulillah. It's been a long time coming.
Yes, and I really appreciate you being here because, as you might know, a lot of us women do enjoy listening to the male perspective, but it has been somewhat challenging finding men who are willing to share their stories. So I really appreciate you being here today. And please, can you begin by introducing yourself?
Sure. The name is Khalid Vawda. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. In my late 40s, got three beautiful children, mashallah. Been blessed with all girls, alhamdulillah. Um, I've been divorced for a while now. In terms of work, I've qualified life coach. I specialize in inbound tourism to South Africa for Muslims as well. And various job experiences. I've lived in South Africa, I've lived in the UK, traveled fairly extensively in my earlier years. Not that I'm that old. Inshallah, there's still a lot more travel left. And yeah, quite a community member in terms of activism. Quite a lot of work to be done in the community, I think, within South Africa and abroad, with the genocide that's been taking place in Palestine. Something that's ongoing, empowering the youth. So yeah, fairly active in quite a few things.
MashaAllah, we wish you tawfiq in that. So let's rewind to the beginning of your marriage story. How long ago was that you got married?
I got married back in 2003. Yeah, it was that was actually at the end of my stint in the UK, and believe it or not, have you watched any of the? My daughter's been watching some of it, so I've been watching a portion of it as well. This Love Is Blind series on Netflix.
No.
Um, People get to communicate with each other for a while, and they don't see each other actually. So I was just reflecting on that, and that's actually how the kid's mum and I met, off a matrimonial website. It was one of the few back then that didn't have images. We communicated for quite a while, at least 3 4 months, I think, and yeah, then we were ready to take the next step. So that was quite a while ago. Yeah,
Okay.
2002, 2003, somewhere around there.
And she was from the UK?
She was living in the UK, but she's actually a revert from Germany, Russian roots. So yeah, I think she took Shahada in the UK many years before meeting me,
Mm.
and alhamdulillah, yeah, we felt there was quite a bit of commonality in terms of where we were and where we wanted to get to, and it was a unique experience, and obviously, within the community, people weren't used to anything like that happening, because people would get married through the normal networks, or somebody would get married, having known somebody or dated somebody for a while. So trust Khalid to break the mold and go all the way abroad in quite a trailblazing fashion, which I was told.
So how long was that marriage?
We were married for about 11, 12 years in total, um, until around 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
That's quite a long time. So when did you realize that things are probably not going to work out?
There was a lot of obviously reflecting that I did after. While I was in the marriage, my main focus was keeping the marriage together. Um, and I suppose once everything had ended, then you kind of take stock and you realize, because you're alone afterwards. During the marriage, I suppose it was the last attempt to try and reconcile, where we had some intervention from some friends. We had a sit down, and I realized, yeah, it takes two to be in this, not just one, and one party didn't want to be in this anymore. And then that, yeah, I suppose the realization hit me. It was something that I suppose was there for a while before, but I maybe blocked it out, or I maybe tried more than I should have to make it work. But given the fact that we had kids and there was a lot invested in the marriage, I did whatever I could to try and make it work.
So who initiated the divorce?
It was from her side.
So that's interesting because you were the one who took the initiative. So how did that impact you emotionally?
To be honest, I felt it was coming. Um, and I think in retrospect, when I did some homework afterwards, the point at which we tried to salvage it and look at all the different avenues, it was far gone at that point. I won't pin the blame on any particular one, but I think it was just too far gone at that point. And when somebody switched off, they've switched off. There's not much you can do, to flick that switch back on. They've completely switched off, and they don't want a part of it anymore. And it's a matter of coming to terms with it. So, yeah, I just kind of pushed until the end, until as far as it could go, with the hope, small hope that this could be salvaged in some way or another.
So how did that impact you emotionally? Like, were you like, oh, Alhamdulillah, I'm just so relieved this is over, or was it actually quite distressing, depressing, etc.?
Emotionally, at the time, one of the most difficult moments for me was when I had to break it to the kids. That day and that moment will just remain etched in my memory forever because it was. I think I've buried it quite deep inside. It was quite a traumatic experience. The kids were quite young. It was a day of my nephew's wedding as well, um, and it just had to be done that day. And it was, yeah, it was devastating. I suppose I didn't unpack it immediately. It was very emotional. It was emotional watching the kids having to go through that. But it was something that was inevitable. It needed to happen. If it wasn't that day, it was going to happen the next day or the day after. And I needed to break it to them, because I needed to explain to them that this wasn't as a result of them, that they had no reason to think that they were the cause of this. And because they were quite young, I tried to explain to them from a perspective of, I tried to add some silly humor to it in terms of, adults not being the best at certain things and sometimes make ill decisions and these types of things. Yeah, but it was just, I think, for me, it was devastating to see the kids having to go through that, and the emotion that poured out from them on that day. So that was, yeah, it was quite a traumatic day, morning.
So after the separation, did you return to South Africa?
We were living in South Africa, and after the divorce and separation, because the kids were still at school here, they finished off the school here, and then I gave my word that I'd take them over to England. Um, so I didn't want to send them halfway through a year. So I yeah. She'd gone over halfway through the year once the divorce was in process, and at the end of the year, I took the kids over.
So you moved. You moved.
I moved the kids and I came back.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so how
Yeah.
long were you away, separated from your kids?
So initially, the kids were going to move over. That was a decision that was suggested, and I felt they needed their mum as well. And we got a ruling from one of the local ulama regarding this. Obviously, there's different views depending on different schools of thought, um, and I didn't want to split them up. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I had all the right to, but I felt that was going to be detrimental to them. I felt that this process that Allah's put them through, having each other through this process, is something that would strengthen them as they grow up and strengthen their relation. So I had to think a little bit long term, even though my emotions were telling me otherwise. Yeah, and I made a decision for the better of all three of them. That if you guys going over, you all go over. I'm not going to split you guys up.
Yeah, so how frequently would you meet them?
So once they were in England, I'd obviously things had changed for me because I now moved out and started life all over again. I'd go over twice a year to England to visit them. So that was something to look forward to. I mean, that the first visit was, subhanAllah, it was a beautiful visit. It was after like 6 or 7 months. In fact, when I saw them off, when I went to drop them off, I didn't think I was going to see them again. I didn't know. And again, that was another entire emotional chapter because you're not sure when you're going to see them again. Circumstances could change, financial situations could change. There's no guarantees about anything. But alhamdulillah, I kept on plugging away. I started new options, and maybe we can talk about that in a while. I started some other options in terms of work, and my focus was to be able to see them. So alhamdulillah, Allah enabled me to manage to go over, and it was like 6, 7 months later during the summer. So the first meeting was excellent. We spent lots of time together, took them down to London. We had a nice holiday together. And then, with South Africans going to England, you get a 6-month visa. So I made sure I made use of that same visa again towards the end of the year in December. So like that, I'd go over twice a year.
It must have been very difficult for you emotionally to be away
It
from.
was, it was, it was being away from them, not being able to be there for them and support them through whatever they're going through. And the greatest fear for me was, them being in a situation where, obviously, it's a non-Muslim country. South Africa is as well. But my main concern was an Islamic environment for them, something safe in terms of their tarbiyah. Because I know I did my utmost in that regard. It wasn't perfect while they were growing up, but I made sure, as much as possible, there was a conducive environment for them. And their mum obviously played a massive part in this. I mean, I think we did that well together. But on their own, when you've just got one parent who's obviously working, who's trying to, pay the bills and these types of things and manage an environment, it does become quite a challenge, especially when you in an environment which is where you don't have family or friends. So that does become a bigger challenge. And that was the main part, just being. So what I did, in fact, at the time was I purchased some textbooks from a curriculum. I think it was with Dar es Salaam, and I started doing their lessons online with them, like 3, 4 times a week, just to make sure that they don't lose out on their Islamic learning. I had to do that because it wasn't going to happen. At the masjid, once a week, there were lessons taking place, but it became too much for them to get back and forth. And if I didn't take the initiative there, it wouldn't have happened. So I made sure that that's something that started, and we kept that going on. So that happened for a while as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you feel that you were able to father effectively at a distance in general?
I suppose I don't know what the measure would be, but I felt I did my best. That was something that was important. Obviously, as parents, there's moments that happen with kids. You don't plan for those moments. Something will happen. They'll say something. They'll ask a question. It just happens. And you parent at that time when the situation takes place. It's quite organic. Whereas when you have a scheduled call X amount of times a week at this particular time, it's a conversation you're having about whatever your thoughts are and whatever's happened during the day or the week or that type of thing. So I suppose under the circumstances, it was the best that I could have done. But there's always room for improvement. I think, yeah. It was difficult not being able to be there in those moments because I really enjoyed those moments with the kids while they're growing up. Something happens, you have a fun moment, you have something that you learn about. They'll ask you something quirky or question, and it actually makes you think. If you don't know, you go and obviously give them the right answer. So those were the things I felt I missed out on, but it is what it is.
Okay, I'd like to go back to this post-divorce phase for you because an 11-year marriage is a long time. So now you are a single man in South Africa after an 11-year relationship. Your children are not with you anymore. So what was that adjustment phase like? And did you go for some kind of therapy? I mean, just in every sphere of your life, what was going on?
It was an adjustment. I actually found, obviously, I had a lot of time. I had started towards, so maybe about 2 or 3 years before the marriage ended, I started doing my life coaching training. And I felt that helped me quite a bit. That helped me to understand myself, even while everything was happening. And obviously, once the marriage had ended, that gave me a lot of tools because I understood myself a lot better. And having been now out of the situation, it gave me the opportunity to reflect a lot. It gave me the opportunity to think and to look at, yes, okay, it is what it is. It's happened, Qadr Allah, for whatever reason. What was my part in that? Because obviously it takes two to make a marriage work. It takes two to make a marriage not work. So I needed to take responsibility for my part. And in retrospect, while I might have disagreed with some of the decisions of the kid's mum, I understood where she was coming from. And perhaps why her decisions were made. Even though I might not have agreed with it, I felt, okay, those were reasons. And I think that helped me to. I'm not somebody who believes in bad blood. I don't like that. I don't like carrying unnecessary weight. Life's long enough anyway, and you've got your own baggage. But I didn't feel the need to become one of those people who now, who's concerned about everything about the ex and who badmouths the ex every opportunity they get. No, she's a Muslima. She's the mother of my kids. We had our disagreements. They were between us. It's got no bearing on the kids. And I don't want to make riba, and I don't expect anybody else to do the same. So a lot of self-reflection. I started looking at fitness for the first time in many years, because I used to play football before. And once the kids came, kids were the fitness. And then one too many Pepsis, they tend to, yeah, it doesn't do well for your fitness. So alhamdulillah, I started paying attention to fitness. Started another business as well. So while I was working, I started the tour business as well. So my mind was focused because there were things to do, and there were places to get to. But I didn't feel I needed to go for therapy. A lot of what I did worked out through my coaching program, and I learned a lot about myself through there.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I mean, people go through the coaching training. It's as if they themselves are being coached.
Yeah.
Are you willing to talk more about what you take accountability for?
Absolutely. So, lessons learned, obviously, in terms of naivety, I think, you have a certain understanding or perspective on things, and kind of wet behind the ears, when you just jump into marriage. Look, we've got, I wouldn't say limitations, we've got guidance as Muslims in terms of what we can do and can't do before marriage. You can't have an endless relationship and date and live together and all those types of things. I felt at the time we, through the endless conversations that we had, we were going in the same direction. And I understood that a change of environment for her became something quite difficult after a while. And we did try on a few occasions to relocate. For whatever reason, that didn't work out. But the way I was raised as well was, when there's a challenge, you work through it, you knuckle down and you work through it, no matter what. That's stayed quite strong with me. There's a strong work ethic through what I've seen my dad instill in me going through the years, how I've seen him function. And there's a lot of lessons I picked up from that. So, yeah, naivety would be one. I suppose not. I didn't know. I realized, subhanAllah, we had one of our first sessions with a life coach, with a marriage coach. And I actually realized I didn't know women at all. I was asked the question, and it was, when I thought about it afterwards, I was quite embarrassed actually, but it was the honest truth. I just didn't know. But I wasn't somebody who wasn't willing to learn. And I tried to obviously develop in that regard. And yeah, so I suppose just taking time to learn about things, just taking time to understand each other a bit better. And maybe the optimist inside of me thought, and maybe assumed wrongly, that, this completely different circumstances and environment, you could make something work long term. But I suppose later stage in the marriage, you needed different types of things. And for me, my understanding is that if if you've made a decision or you try and do something, and Allah doesn't enable that to happen, no matter what you try, it wasn't meant to happen. So if we were trying to move abroad with the family and doors kept closing, for me, that was something that was not meant to happen at that particular time. And then obviously as the kids grow, they become settled in an environment. You don't want to uproot. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made at different times. Um, but yeah, definitely, I think a bit of naivety on my side, and um, maybe taking a bit more time to understand um, the opposite gender, which obviously I have learned a lot since then. But at the time, that was something that maybe I didn't know enough about.
So, they say that to say, if only, or I should have, is from shaitan. However, now being an older, wiser version of yourself, if you had to go back to, what was it, 2003 or before that, what advice would you give to your younger self about the way that you chose to get married?
Gosh, um, I would think just maybe take a bit more time. That's what I would have said. Just take a bit more time. It was very sudden. It was literally about 3 months, 3 to 4 months of chatting, and lots of phone calls, emails. There was no WhatsApp before then. So lots of money spent on phone bills and these types of things. And uh, just when we felt it was right, we exchanged pictures and we were happy with what we saw both ways. And Bismillah, we went ahead with it. Um, so um, yeah, I would just tell myself, take a bit more time, just learn about the opposite gender. You don't have to learn by getting into a relationship, but just learn about a bit more about the makeup and the psyche, and about women and how they how they would understand things, how they would approach situations. We've got one of the things we did during the marriage was and it was actually quite good. I've implemented it in my coaching as well. Was we read a book about it's a famous book by John Gray, um,
Men Are From Mars.
Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Like when we read that book, it was hilarious because I'm like, everything this guy is saying is just spot on. And she was nodding the same thing while we're reading in terms of how we view things. That was one of the first times that I realized, wow, okay, it's the same thing we're looking at, but we're seeing it from two completely different perspectives. So just take a bit of time to get an understanding around that. And sometimes take a step back as well.
Do you have an opinion about marrying a foreigner?
I don't see a difference. For me, person is a person, a Muslim's a Muslim. I don't see anything about. I know there's a big discussion, and I suppose a part of me is because growing up in the community, there's been a lot of tribalism within the South African Indian community growing up. I think we're getting through that now. Um, but I just felt that this was not anything that I related to. It was nothing that I associated with. And then when I started learning in my deen, it just rubber stamped all my thoughts from before. This has nothing to do with your deen as well. It's purely asabiya, and there's no place for this in the life of a Muslim. So if you're on the same page, if you have similar outlooks, if you can adjust to each other's lifestyles, Bismillah. Obviously, there's a cultural aspect to things. There's a realistic aspect to this, and if that's something that both parties can make an effort towards in terms of making the other comfortable with your particular cultural setting, then by all means. But it will take a bit of extra work. It will take a bit of extra work.
Mhm.
So if you're willing to take those steps, then absolutely. If you're not willing to take those steps, then probably don't do that.
So then what happened next?
So that was between, yeah. So well, obviously stayed single for a while. I met a few people in between. That's when I found out about marriage websites, and it was a long, long, long way away from 2002. There were quite a few good websites. I had a friend in the UK who actually runs marriage events and quite large numbers. So he invited me to observe one of them. I did. I took part in one of them. It was quite overwhelming because there were loads of people, um, but it was a really interesting experience. I realized, obviously, at the time now, you're in your workspace. You are within your family. You know everybody within your family. You know everyone within your friend circle. It's becoming a bit of a challenge for people who want to pursue halal. Haram options are available everywhere. People who want to pursue halal, it becomes a bit of a challenge. How do you go about finding somebody? Because the infamous anti-network, which worked quite well back in the day, doesn't work that well anymore. Um, there've been a lot of horror stories. Um, just too many things happening. So I explored one or two of those. There's some really good platforms available. There's some horrendously dodgy platforms available. Uh, so in the second marriage, I'd actually met somebody. We were Facebook friends for a while, and then we got chatting a little further. And again, I obviously didn't learn my lesson, but it was rushed. Again, for practical reasons. She had kids, I've got kids. It was a school year. She was living in a different city. And for those reasons, we got into this. And yeah, at the first speed bump that we underwent, literally the wheels came off the car. Everything fell apart. Um, and again, it was quite strange for me, although I saw some signs early on in the marriage which I didn't know about. There were certain things I didn't know about. Again, I was willing to work through this, but it started impacting my kids, and my kids were already, they were vulnerable from what had happened before. So
But were your children in England?
so my kids had come back to South Africa after spending about 3 years in England. They came back to South Africa and they were living with me. So it was a single dad phase from like 2016, 2017 onwards. And alhamdulillah, it was a lot of bonding time, a lot of quality time together. And it was a good time, alhamdulillah, good time with the girls. So this was actually impacting on the girls directly. And yeah, it was just time to walk away from it. Um, it didn't even last a year. Alhamdulillah, I have nothing bad to say about her. I wish her well. I wish the boys well. We got on quite well, the boys and I. But blended families, again, a new situation. You've got to do a lot more work. And our challenges, the first major challenge we had, everything kind of just fell apart. So yeah, that was that. Lesson learned.
So, Khalid, since you were in a blended family situation and it didn't work and you kind of got a taste of what that's like, now when you move on, inshallah, and you meet someone and she has children, how would you navigate it differently, the blended family dynamic?
Um, I think in terms of managing the kids from both parties, when you're getting into a situation with blended families, you both need to be on the same page. You need to be more than mature to be able to manage both sets of kids, and you need to have an agreement in terms of how you would go about doing that as you're getting the family together, as you're getting things to grow, as you're developing this understanding between the kids. I felt I got on very well with the two boys. Initially, there was a bit of hesitancy because they didn't know me, um, but I was just playful with them, and then we got on very, very well, alhamdulillah. Where to the point where one of the boys, beautiful boys, both of them, mashallah. One of them was very reserved and very quiet initially. But towards the end, I mean, he just, as soon as he gets into the car after madrasa, he just start letting me know about his day before I even ask him anything. Previously, I asked him, "How was your day?" Fine. Did you do anything interesting today? No. It was that type of thing. But towards the end, alhamdulillah, it was a nice relationship. So I'm grateful that I had a relationship with two boys. I was able to father two boys for a short period of time, and they've got a dad, fantastic guy as well. I met him as well, and obviously he'd see his boys every now and then. And yeah, it is what it is. But it was impacting on my girls, and that wasn't something that I was going to let happen. I'm very protective of them emotionally because of what they've had to go through. And obviously, I think in the back of your mind as a parent, when you go through a divorce, you do feel that you do feel a bit of guilt in that regard. Um, so the fact that this was happening a second time and they were being impacted directly, I didn't want to have that going on. So yeah, we decided just let's walk away from it before things develop even further and things get worse.
Do you have any input as how divorce impacts men differently than women?
I've seen extreme cases. I've come across extreme cases because of my coaching as well. Um, it can literally drive guys over the edge, where they can do things that they would never have dreamt of doing. Um, I'm talking emotionally, physically. It can drive you into extremes. If you don't have a check on your deen, firstly, and your foundation and your relation with Allah, because a lot of this is being able to take a step back and put things into perspective. Okay, this hasn't worked out. I've tried I felt I did what I could. This is what I did wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm only in control of so much. I need to, and I think this is one of the major takeaways from me from being married was I'm not really in control. Allah is in control. And if I'm going to kill myself over emotionally, mentally about why something's not working, um, I'm not understanding my relation with Allah because I've asked Allah to guide me in decisions. I've asked Allah to help me in terms of my life, but I want to hold on to everything. I'm going to live with anxiety for the rest of my life if that's the case. I need to let go. I need to let go. If I let go, Allah is in control. If it was meant for me and if it was good for me, Allah would have allowed it to happen. If it wasn't, it wasn't. That helped me immensely. Just developing that understanding a little further. I heard a talk from one of the scholars a while ago around the subject, in terms of putting your trust in Allah. We verbalize that, but how much do we actually put that into practice, and what does it entail putting that into practice? So if a situation hasn't worked out, okay, it hasn't worked out. Yes, I feel emotionally heavy about it. I might shed a few tears, whatever I might do, but there's a reason it hasn't happened. And if I look to the seerah, I'll find examples there of how to deal with whatever comes into my life. So those were strong points for me to go back to as a reference point. And talking to Allah in sujood was the most therapeutic thing ever. It still is till today. So no matter what the situation is, during tahajjud, in your sujood, it makes an immense difference to oneself. So if that is unstable, or if that relationship with Allah is weak, and I'm not being judgmental towards any particular individual, but if your foundation with Allah is weak, you can easily lean towards extremes in terms of illicit relationships, in terms of abuse of substances, in terms of wild lifestyle changes, completely wild, in terms of becoming abusive towards your ex, maybe, and then bad mouthing your ex. It's very easy on social media to just tarnish somebody's reputation just based on a rumor or complete lie. You can go to extremes in that regard. There've been cases where it's happened. There've been cases where it's happened. So, yeah, guys can react in the most extreme ways. Not to say women can't, um, but this just from a male perspective, it can swing. It can swing, and I think critical to that is having a decent relation with Allah, or working on strengthening that relation at this particular time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm wondering, do you think that this manifests because men don't have like a processing outlet? Like with women, they get together and they chat about everything, and we can easily find ways of expressing ourselves emotionally. So do you think that it's because men are like repressing so much that it manifests in toxic ways?
Um, possibly. Although it's not all men. There's quite a few men who just, they absorb all of the pain, and they just continue because you're not allowed to. Society doesn't allow you to feel pain, to show your pain, to be able to articulate that in any way, shape, or form. You've got to just knuckle on, and you've got to get on with life. There's no time to be sad, those types of things. There's a lot more of those who quietly absorb this and just go about their lives, and they just, all the pain becomes a part of them, and they have no outlet to be able to verbalize this. They've got a good bunch of friends maybe, or support structure. Um, and your support structure is a double-edged sword, I feel. It can be constructive in terms of supporting you, or it can be detrimental to you, depending on who they are. Yes, your friends care about you. So no matter what, they will do whatever they do to support you. It might not be the best for the situation. Sometimes you need a friend to tell you, you know what you're doing is wrong. It's not the right way to go about it. You need a friend to be straight up with you, not just to mask over a situation. And that's why I feel sometimes it can be detrimental. And I've seen this in men and women. So a good network, an honest network of friends who would help in that situation is important. But the extreme cases that I mentioned about men who gravitate towards that, those are few. I mentioned it first because it's something that's so severe. But a lot more of it is guys who just absorb all of this pain and they just get on with things without actually starting to deal with things. Many guys find it difficult to talk about these things. And I've had situations where I know individuals who've gone through divorces or might have lost a partner, to be able to just sit down with somebody and talk. Don't talk to me as your friend because I'm going to support you fully. Sit down with somebody who's a therapist. Understand what's going on in your mind and in your heart, and then see how you unpack the situation. And 8 out of 10 times it works out positively for those who do try. But for men to talk about feelings is one of the most challenging things.
This is a very broad philosophical topic, and I don't know if you would like to say something on it. There are so many divorces everywhere. Like, it's rampant. Is there another way? Like, do you have any insight on that? I mean, that's just like, how do we get world peace type of a question. But I mean, do you have any comments on that?
There's a number of reasons behind it, I think. I've done a bit of homework into this, and I've looked at obviously situations locally and in other countries where I've lived. So on the negative side, in the old days, people were willing to live with wrong that was done to them and injustice that was done to them. No matter what, there was a great taboo on if you divorced. People would shun you, people would look at you badly, those types of things. On the flip side, though, with that generation, there was a greater work ethic, and there was a greater sense of responsibility beyond just myself. And that's why you have a lot of situations where, marriages lasted for decades and decades and decades. You'll see 60, 70-year marriages. And you'll absorb the beauty when you see them still together at the age of 80 or 90. Alhamdulillah. One of the things that comes to mind in that regard was an incident during time of Umar radiallahu anh, when somebody wanted to get divorced because they were in old age or a little older. I think the woman said she didn't find him attractive anymore, and Umar said, well, what about the years of service that you've had together? What about everything else in the marriage? So there's a lot more to it. With the current generation, everything's too easy. Everything's instant. The swipe culture is a major problem. The pop culture that we have, in terms of, it's as easy as literally. And I've had situations like this where I've coached people and I've worked with people where you're in a marriage and basically you're in the same bed, you're both on your phones, and somebody's having a conversation with somebody else, and it's not a halal conversation at all. Haram is so easy now. It's literally a few clicks on your phone. And it's too much of an easy, if it doesn't work, I'll get out of it. So everybody plans for the wedding. Nobody plans for the marriage. There's a lot invested into I want this type of wedding. I want it here. I want this type of decor. Everybody must wear this type of stuff. No. Your investment needs to be into the marriage, not into the wedding. Have a wedding, alhamdulillah, within means and no israf, but you need to invest in the marriage and not just the wedding. A big part of the problem, and I can say this confidently, being a parent in my 40s, a big part of the problem are parents, because parents haven't prepared their kids for marriage. Parents don't talk to their kids about relationships. Aside from the butterflies and all of those things, the hard and the daily situations you get into as a couple, life's challenges. How do you deal with those? How do you navigate those? It's not where, okay, so you've had a problem, come and tell me about it, and if you feel it's too much, you can always leave him or you can leave her. No, it doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that.
If I may interject, so then how would you, as a divorced man, single parent, where you can't demonstrate, right? How would you teach your children about relationships and commitment and all of those valuable things to make a long-lasting marriage?
A lot of conversation. I actually developed a course, a premarital coaching course, which I feel, especially for Muslims living in the West, I've only lived in the West, so I feel it's something that should be compulsory for anyone wanting to get married, irrespective of age, whether it's the first time or even somebody who's getting married for the second or third time. During the courting period, you don't really have difficult conversations, and you need to have those difficult conversations. You need to really understand each other's background and whether you're compatible with each other. Yes, you're both Muslim, you're both practicing, you've got similar values. Alhamdulillah, that's all great. But are you really compatible? Are you able to, how do you react in a situation where there's conflict? How do you react to a situation where you don't get your way? How do you compromise? Where do you compromise? So a lot of conversation needs to be had prior to marriage. It's not going to prepare you for everything, but I feel it takes off, the blinkers, the butterfly blinkers before. And for anybody who tells me before marriage that you're in love, it's not love. It's not love. You can be attracted to somebody by all means. You might see something, you might see some values, some qualities that you're attracted to, but love is something that Allah builds in your hearts thereafter. And if it's based on that you want to please Allah, the I culture today is probably one of the most detrimental things to marriages, because it's me first. We're worshipping I, and it's not about us as a collective. So I'm going to have to compromise because I'm in a relationship. I've got children. I've got a husband. I've got a wife. We have to make certain compromises in order to work. I'm not going to get my way every single time. Let's go back to our teachings in our deen in terms of our principles. We're too easily influenced by pop culture, and I think we need to just go back to our principles in our deen, and that could be a way forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Khalid, so I believe that you founded Super Dad Network. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, so obviously I'm greatly honored at being a father, that Allah's blessed me with this. I think a large part of that was what I learned from my late father as well, and things I picked up from the seerah. I've got a relative in the family who I view as a father as well, who I picked up a lot from as well. And seeing the need and the importance of, firstly, the emphasis that's placed on motherhood, rightly so, it's absolutely critical. But seeing the war against families in this day and age that we have, coming in with all of these concepts of LGBT and blah, 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 it's completely destroying the family structure. If you don't have a family structure, you don't have a community. And if you don't have a community, you are open game for shaitan. And there is this move, especially in the West, to try and destroy the family structure. It's been in place. Obviously, it's getting stronger now, but for the last 3 or 4 decades. The primary focus of the attack of this movement is the father in the family. So if you look at pop culture, you seldomly find a father who is, the stand-up role model or the lead character. Fathers are depicted as bumbling idiots or, the butt of the jokes. Now, if you've relegated the head of the household to that, then you've basically pulled that foundation out of the family. And then everything else is fair game. The absence of fathers, the absence of active fathers, because you've got a situation where you might have a father who's there, but he's not present. So active parenting, active fathering The situation around that is when you have that, or rather, sorry, let me go back to the absence. When you have the absence of that, it impacts on boys and girls in a different way. The home basically falls apart. Not saying mums can't do single parenting, but you're not meant to be single parents. You're meant to co-parent because kids get certain things from the mum, kids get certain things from the father. This is how Allah has designed our families. And a mother cannot be a father, and a father cannot be a mother. It's just impossible. You can fill in those shoes for a short period, but you can't be a mother. A father can't be a mother, and a mother can't be a father. The absence of this has led to kids not having an active role model. So if you take boys, for example, they need their fathers as a role model. And if he's not there, they will find somebody else as a role model because you do need that. You gravitate towards that as a boy, no matter what. So if your father's not there, you'll find somebody in the community. You'll find, if you're living in a bad community, or I wouldn't say bad, but rather a community which has more challenges, you look at the guy on the street corner who's got lots of gold jewelry on, he's got lots of girls around, always money, you'll gravitate towards that. Or you'll find somebody on social media to follow. And that's a lifestyle that is only going in one direction. With girls, the self-esteem that they develop from their fathers, the confidence that their fathers give them when they're seen, when they know that they are loved, they're protected, they've got somebody who's always got their back no matter what. When that is absent, most times, and research and stats have backed this up, they end up in abusive relationships. And they keep going back into the same abusive relationship, and they keep making excuses for that abuse because it was absent there. So, beautiful lesson I learned from the seerah. Whenever the Prophet ﷺ was sitting down, or he was in a gathering, and Fatima radiallahu anha would come in, he would give up his seat for her. Now, it's a beautiful story, but there's such a deep psychological impact from this. You know, the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us about developing the self-esteem in your daughters, in your girls, and giving them that self-confidence. He showed her in that moment, you are the most important person. Not everybody in this room. It could have been the Khulafa, it could have been some of the top Sahaba, it could have been, I don't know, leaders. The Prophet ﷺ gave up his seat for her. So she knows that. When she married Ali, it wasn't based on anything flimsy, it was based on value and what Ali had said in terms of who he was. Now, if you don't have that self-esteem, any guy comes along and he utters a few nice words, which he hasn't heard before, and predators, there are lots of predators who prey on women like this because they know exactly what to use to get in and to use and abuse and throw the girls away. So, you know, it's the need for fathering and the need for people to understand their role as fathers. It's not just about having a child. No, it's far more than that. You've got to be present, you've got to be active, and you've got to lead and direct and guide and teach your children. So it's an active, it's a verb. Fathering is a verb. You've got to be present. And it's something, once you're a father for life. There's no, I'm a father today, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. No. You are in it, you've made the commitment. If not, then don't get into it at all. So the Super Dad Network is basically to help guys understand what fathering is, what parenting is from a fathering perspective. Understanding yourself. I've taken my coaching principles. I've incorporated what I've learned from the seerah, my own experiences as well, to help fathers to be able to be more active, more present, because I feel then you have a stronger society. If people understand their roles as fathers and they take the lead in their families, inshallah, it'll be better for their kids.
And to be clear, this is for all fathers, not just divorced men, but all dads in general.
All fathers, yeah.
Okay. Khalid, in closing, any words of nasiha or thoughts?
First and foremost is understand your relation with Allah. And one of the major causes we have of anxiety in the world, men and women, is we want to be in control of everything. We're not in control. We're in control of our actions. We're not in control of the results of our actions. The sooner we can understand that Allah is the one in control, we'll reduce anxiety, heart attacks, stress levels, all of those things. Certain things are not meant to happen, and we need to accept those. Accept that this is what Allah has put out. I've tried everything, it's not working. I'm not saying the flip side of that is we don't do anything. No, you exert yourself to the maximum. You understand the situation, you do your research, you do all of those things. But at the end of the day, our anxiety levels, which is just ridiculous, as Muslims, we shouldn't be having these anxiety levels. Through salah and through patience in Allah and understanding that this is Allah's process. The lessons we're getting out of occupied Palestine over the last 11 months in terms of relation with Allah, if we don't take lessons from this, all of us introspectively, then we've got serious issues, I think.
Thank you, Khalid. It's been insightful. I wish you and your daughters all the best, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for having me.